We'll go ahead and get started now. So welcome everyone to Our Power's May Power Lunch. My name is Sophie Gaulkin and I'm a member of the Our Power board. Since 2020, Our Power has been working hard to drive change towards energy democracy and a more just and rapid transition to clean energy independence. So we're striving towards a day when utilities are fully accountable to those they serve and when all Maine people can have the trust, confidence, and control in our energy future that we deserve. So today we are incredibly excited to hear from several special guests about blowing the whistle on bad corporate behavior and about Maine's first in the nation bill to create a utility whistleblower program. So this is especially important now at a time when accountability is disintegrating in Washington, D.C. Our Power is hoping that today helps you see a way that we can create at least a little more accountability here at home. So you will hear from, and we have this great lineup, Tyler Furman, an FBI whistleblower, Alicia Wilbur, a Department of Justice whistleblower, Senator Mike Tipping, our Maine whistleblower bill sponsor, and then Seth Berry, Executive Director of Our Power. So the way we'll set this up is each of our guests will speak briefly, and at the end, we'll try to get to as many of your questions as possible before our stop at 1 p.m. We do ask that you use the Q&A function as opposed to the chat just to make sure that we can see your question. And that's this button at the bottom of your screen, which will let you type in that question. You can put in those questions at any time during presentations, and we'll just try to get to as many as possible. So before I introduce our first guest, I want to just give a heads up that our utility whistleblower bill will have a public hearing very, very soon, as early as next week. And we do expect some strong resistance from CMP and Versant to be expected. So we're excited to have so many of you joining us now, and hope that as many of you as possible can also show up at the public hearing and ask our state legislators to make this a law. It's a big idea. It would be first in the nation, but we really think that with your help, we can make it happen. And we'll get into a little more about how it'll work later. Seth will talk about what's in the bill and how you can help. So without further ado, our first guest is Tyler Furman. Tyler was recently featured in HBO's blockbuster show, The Dark Money Game, which I highly recommend. And as a former Republican political operative, Tyler blew the whistle on one of the biggest utility scandals in history, a $61 million bribery scheme that landed several top utility executives and top Ohio politicians in jail, some of them for decades. So Tyler, thank you so much for joining us. Please jump right in and tell us your story.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sophie. I appreciate it, and thanks to all of you for asking me to come today. My name's Tyler Furman, and I was born and raised in the state of Ohio, and worked in state and local government, but also in political circles for a long time. In 2019, my former boss, the Ohio Speaker of the House, and another former boss and mentor, the former chairman of the Ohio GOP, um, got involved in passing what was essentially a taxpayer-funded bailout for two failing nuclear plants owned by First Energy, which is one of Ohio's largest utilities. The Republican-led legislature in the state of Ohio rammed the bill through the legislative process extremely quickly. The governor signed it as soon as it was on his desk, and it was a really a monumental piece of legislation that seemed extremely out of character for the group of legislators that passed it. $1.5 billion of taxpayer dollars being sent to bail out failing nuclear plants, but also it came with the price tag of essentially eliminating incentives for wind and solar programs in the state as well, and was somehow billed as the Ohio Clean Air Program, when in fact it did exactly the opposite. Shortly after its passage, a group of citizen organizations, environmental organizations, and other stakeholders joined together to try and initiate the ballot referendum process. They wanted to repeal the bill and ensure that Ohioans were not uh, taken advantage of with the fees that were being tacked onto their backs. I was asked to lead the repeal campaign for the state, to manage the ground game and the signature gathering effort to ensure that we could really stop this bill from going into effect. And so what I did is I had good relationships with the folks on the other side and approached them and said, I'm going to be on the opposite side from you. I just want to let you know. And I was told that's politics. It's business. It's fine. We're going to be on the opposite side sometimes. About a week in to running that operation, I was contacted and asked to meet with some of these folks for coffee. And it didn't seem out of the ordinary. I'd known them for years. And we sat down, but the conversation took a very dark turn very quickly. I was essentially offered whatever house, whatever vehicle, whatever salary, all of my debt paid off, if I would just sell my team down the river and provide insider information to the folks that were opposed to the bill's repeal. That conversation was shocking and led me to contact the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and they met with me. They heard the story and they said, we're already investigating the process that was used to push this bill through. You could be a valuable resource for us. And so the folks trying to keep that bill in place, they thought that I had taken them up on their deal. In fact, though, I was wearing a wire for the FBI and spent the next several months uh, having recorded phone conversations, attending recorded meetings with these individuals, and finding myself having to make up information to share with them to keep them convinced that I was, in fact, helping them. My story, as Sophie mentioned, is detailed pretty well in HBO's new documentary, The Dark Money Game, Ohio Confidential. But what happened was the ongoing investigation involved lots and lots of circumstantial evidence, but they needed something to directly tie these individuals to what was being suspected they were up to. My recordings and my coming forward provided them with the information they needed to be able to finally make arrests and try the case. The result of all of that was uncovering a $61 million bribery and corruption ring. Vox labeled that piece of legislation, Ohio House Bill 6, the worst energy policy in United States history. And a jury during that federal trial found the individuals responsible guilty after just 9 hours of deliberation over the course of 2 days. The former Ohio Speaker of the House is now a convicted felon, as are other individuals that were involved in the case. He's currently serving a 20-year sentence in federal prison. I really believe that transparency is more important now more than ever, because what we also learned through that process was that the $61 million in bribery had come directly from this very large utility. They had used that money to buy the Speaker of the House, to buy his leadership team, to buy the lobbyists and other individuals that were involved in getting that bill passed, and at the expense of harming the people of the state of Ohio. Now, my story is interesting, but it's not entirely unique. There are other instances of things like this happening all over the country. And I really believe that whistleblowers, people who are willing to come forward, who are willing to do the right thing, need to have resources and tools and programs in place that help them do so. My situation was a little more unique. I didn't work inside the utility, but I imagine that if there had been protections put in place to ensure that individuals who knew information that should have been reported from the beginning, that we may not have seen things go as far as they did in Ohio. So, I'm extremely grateful for the opportunity, and I really, really love what you all are doing to help advance this cause and help bring these situations to light and to empower people who are willing to do the right thing to speak up with the ability to do that. So thank you all so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Tyler. That's really, really incredible. And just thank you for sharing your experience and perspective. We know you're just starting a new job, so we'll send you along questions we get and try to add them later. But next up, we have Alicia Wilbur. Alicia is from Maine and blew the whistle on a major medical services provider. Her case was then taken up by the Department of Justice and ultimately resulted in a settlement of tens of millions of dollars. Due to the settlement, Alicia's unable to answer specific questions about her case, but was kind enough to join us today to talk about how it feels to be a whistleblower in that experience. And so if we want whistleblowers to come forward, which we do, we really need to know this. So Alicia, thank you, and please go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, my story is not as detailed or as exciting as Tyler's, but I was asked to be here to kind of share the feeling behind being a whistleblower. So um, it was a long road for me, and it was a very lonely road as well because there was a long period of time when my case was under seal, when I couldn't speak with anybody about it whatsoever. So I wanted to share a few things that were told to me by my attorneys that I was speaking with, as well as some close confidants of mine who I was talking to about what was going on. Um, so things I heard were, "You're too young to torpedo your career like that. You'll never work in this industry again. No one will ever hire a whistleblower. You better make sure the money is worth the risk. A substantial portion will belong to your attorneys, and what you do get is fully taxable income. Uh, you will need to find a new job outside of your current company ASAP. It will never work for you to file and still work there. They will figure out who talked. And only about 1 in 5 cases will actually be pursued. Your name will come out regardless of the outcome of the suit." So it definitely is a decision that was a very challenging one to reach. And if there's nothing in it for the whistleblower, I'm not sure why they would want to do it ultimately, because these things, while they may sound harsh and they may sound illegal, are often true. So just wanted to share those thoughts and protect the whistleblowers. That's the only way they're going to blow the whistle.
Wow, Alicia, it's just really inspiring to know that you were able to stand up to all that pressure and just the harsh realities of backlash that can exist for whistleblowers and the career implications, but to do the right thing and speak truth to power. So thank you so much for doing that. I think I'm sure I speak for all of us that that is just really inspiring. And we do know that you also might have to leave early for work, but thank you so much for making time for us. And we'll absolutely be in touch.
Great, thanks.
Great. And moving right along, our next guest is Maine State Senator Mike Tipping. Senator Tipping is the sponsor of the Utility Whistleblower Program bill, and he'll speak a little bit on his purpose in putting this bill forward and other details. So, Senator Tipping, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sophie. Yeah, so I'm Mike Tipping. I represent Senate District 8, which is in Penobscot County. It's kind of north of Bangor, 26 communities from VZ up to Lincoln and over to Springfield. And before I was a state senator, I worked for a long time and still do for the Maine People's Alliance, the Maine People's Resource Center. Also wrote as a columnist for the Press Herald and other newspapers. So I chair the Labor Committee, and I serve on taxation and on government oversight. And one of the areas that I've done a bunch of work on and have a lot of bills in this year is around consumer protection and transparency. So bills including the right to repair electronic devices, around warranties, freedom of access, government contracting. And 2 years ago, I worked with Seth and some other folks on a bill that became a law banning utilities from using ratepayer dollars for advertising and for lobbying. And, there were various arguments about that one, that it wouldn't, do too much. I think we'll hear some similar ones about this one to actually protect consumers in the end. But I think it's incredibly important that we put these protections into place, because not only do they have some chance here of really helping people and preventing some of these bad actions, but they're an important piece to show that government is actually taking these issues seriously, and taking our oversight role of our utilities seriously. And I ended up in the last election, talking about that bill at pretty much every door. here's what I'm doing to lower you electric rates, and also here's my medical debt bill that I got passed. And everyone has a story right now in Maine with either medical debt or electricity rates. Was able to connect on that, and I think being able to talk about holding power accountable in that way is one of the reasons I was able to win. I think, well, I'm the only Democratic senator representing a district that was won by Trump. So that concern over utility prices continues. Been looking for more we can do on that, specific things that can make a difference. Maybe don't cost a lot of money because we have a difficult budget situation this year. And so in talking to advocates, this issue, making sure that we have this whistleblower protection seemed not only incredibly important, but right up the alley of other things I've worked on. So combining those worker protections that we work on every day in the Labor Committee with those consumer protections and the idea of hopefully lowering electricity rates by calling out or having an avenue for people to call out some of these bad actions that are negatively affecting consumers. So this bill, pretty simple, does what it says on the tin. It would create an avenue and protections and remuneration for whistleblowers. It would encourage that accountability, and it would encourage people to identify ways to both lower rates and protect ratepayers. And I would note that from the speakers we've heard already, I think both of them talked about they couldn't have done that without either a whistleblower law that maybe doesn't always fully protect, but at least was there, or literal FBI protection. And so I think it's important to have those protections in law in order to provide an avenue for people to speak out and make a difference on this.
That is so great. Thank you, Senator Tippy, for championing this bill and boiling it down to what really matters and how important it is for protecting consumers and encouraging accountability against these bad actors. It's really great. Thank you. And last up, we have Seth Berry, our executive director of Our Power. And so now that we've covered a bit of why whistleblowers matter, what it's like to be one, some of the pressures that they're facing to come forward, Seth will tell us about how the proposed utility whistleblower program will actually work in practice. Seth?
Thank you, Sophie. Okay, I'm just going to share a screen real quick. And just let me know if you can see this, please. Should be a slide deck. All right. Is that working, Sophie? Great. All right. So the Maine whistleblower utility whistleblower program, as sponsored by Senator Tipping in his coming bill. By the way, it does not have an LD number yet. I saw someone ask that, but it will soon. And the legislature is moving fast. So, this is a bill that you will have the opportunity to testify on extremely soon, possibly next week or the next couple weeks. So please do pay close attention and ask any questions you have, because we want to be able to make sure that everyone on this webinar is able to just articulate the basics of the proposed program. The goal here, and Senator Tipping spoke to this very well, is to improve utility rates and compliance, giving regulators crucial inside information. We should remember that utilities are not just electric utilities. We think of CMP a lot, especially in the Our Power context, but our natural gas utilities are incredibly important to our climate as well. Both of those utilities are. Natural gas leaks because it's methane, and methane is about 80 times more damaging than carbon dioxide as a climate gas. Methane leaks from natural gas systems can be incredibly damaging, and that kind of compliance with our laws and rules is also incredibly important for the climate. So when we say compliance, there are other environmental impacts as well as the obvious economic impacts that our utilities have, with billions at stake every year for Maine people. The way that this program will work is a proven formula, anonymity plus an award. And that formula has been proven by numerous federal programs. Sadly, many of these accountability programs are being dismantled or essentially made toothless by lack of staffing capacity at the federal level right now. But I'm talking about the Securities and Exchange Commission as an incredible whistleblower program. It was enacted under Dodd-Frank and has resulted in many multi-million-dollar penalties and awards for whistleblowers every year since it was first enacted. You can go to the SEC website and learn more. The Department of Justice administers the program that we heard about from Alicia a moment ago. They enforce fraud claims under the False Claims Act against contractors with the federal government. Some of that fraud, for example, is in the healthcare sector. You hear about fraud. It's usually not fraud that's committed by the recipients of healthcare, but rather fraud that's committed by those who administer it and feel like they can cut corners on federal programs, defense contractors, you name it. For many decades, the DOJ has used anonymity plus an award the same way the SEC has. And more recently, NHTSA, the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration, under Pete Buttigieg, enacted the same exact formula, anonymity plus an award, in order to protect vehicle occupants and hold the manufacturers of vehicles accountable for shortcuts that they may be taking that can endanger lives. So in the utility context, we need to remember the same lessons that these other programs have taught us. Whistleblowers need this anonymity, and we'll talk about how the award works as well, both of these things, because they're not just risking their job, they are risking their entire future. When Tyler wore an FBI wire, when Alicia went to a lawyer and then they went to the Department of Justice, she was risking her entire future. And that's why, as she spoke about her family and friends advised her, frankly, not to do it based on what her lawyer was telling her. Don't do it. It's too much of a risk for too little reward. Some of those risks specifically include preemptive firing. So, and I'll talk about this later, but if you go to the boss with a concern about what the boss is doing, you might just be fired on the spot. Maine is an at-will state. So if you're fired preemptively, you may not actually have any whistleblower protections. That's critical. They may also threaten you with non-disparagement clauses that are in the contract you signed when you took the job, or non-disclosure agreements is another well-known mechanism. Loss of severance benefits, loss of retirement benefits, being blacklisted in the entire industry, the only place that you can really legitimately work for what you're trained to do. Threats of libel suits, being called a disgruntled former employee in the media. Now, these are some of the many tools that corporations have at their disposal to deter whistleblowers and severely, severely punish anyone who dares to come forward. So they really are risking their entire future. And right now, Maine's existing whistleblower laws are woefully, woefully inadequate. They were improved, in fairness, in 2022 with a bill sponsored by Governor Mills, or put forward by Governor Mills, I should say. And that's a good step. But even now, an employee of a utility or contractor for a utility must report their concern internally first. And if they don't, then retaliation is allowed. The only way they have any protection from retaliation is if they start by reporting to the boss that they have a real concern about something that's going on. Well, guess what? That means that they can be preemptively fired, and they have no protection from that preemptive firing because Maine is an at-will state. They have zero anonymity if they do want to come forward, so the employer immediately knows. There is no chance of an award for their taking that and risk of their not only their career but their financial future generally. And I think probably shouldn't surprise any of us, therefore, that this mechanism, since it was improved in 2022, has not been used once ever. There's been no instance where a utility whistleblower has come forward in the state of Maine. And we're also, by the way, not really familiar with it elsewhere. Tyler, who you heard from at the top, is a rare exception to that rule. And obviously that was a particularly egregious situation. We're also looking for more, just run-of-the-mill things that may be reported. So here's how it works. It's really anonymity and an award, and also awareness. So the 3 A's. The anonymity involves protecting whistleblower anonymity when they're first reporting. So in our case, they're going to be calling the Public Utilities Commission to provide evidence of a concern. That might be something that's hiking our rates significantly. They might have a very big impact on rates. Often overspending on capital expenses is something that utilities do. It might also be, I mentioned natural gas leaks. It could be they're not compliant with the checks that they're supposed to do with the natural gas system. So methane is being emitted. There's just a couple of examples. And then there may be an award at the end of the rainbow, so to speak, if later on, and this could be years later, it often is in the other programs I talked about, 10 to 30% of whatever the penalty was, if the penalty is at least $250,000 and saved ratepayers money, or was a financial penalty that'll indirectly save ratepayers money. And then the awareness is making the process known to the public. Very important, because we need whistleblowers to know what their rights are. And if each of these steps can be made known to utility employees, the employees of contractors for utilities, we're more likely to actually see activity. How do we know later, once we've enacted the bill, if it's succeeded? Well, Senator Tipping's bill could be looked at, 10 years from now in a couple of ways. One is we can look back and say, were there actual tips leading to sanctions and awards? Did it function in that way actively, or did it function passively? Can we look back and say, gosh, our utilities have been doing great lately. They're really performing at efficiently. They're complying, they're checking all the boxes, great service quality indices, reduced rates. We might indirectly decide that maybe because the discipline of this program exists, that they have done better, that they've actually stepped up their game. A little more specifics on the process, and then we'll stop, and I think we'll be going to questions and answers soon. So please do keep your Q&A coming. There are basically 9 specific steps in the bill. First, the commission, again, this is the PUC, posts to its website information about the Whistleblower Act once it does become law. Secondly, a tip comes forward. So a whistleblower calls or emails the PUC. There's a Consumer Assistance and Safety Division that generally is the first line of reporting. And that exists right now. If you have a complaint about your utility, you can call CISD, and they can request that their identity and specific information be made confidential as the initial investigation is taking place. That's obviously for the protection of the whistleblower. And next, the CASD disseminates the information within the Public Utilities Commission more generally, so that investigatory staff, the commissioners themselves, the commissioners' lawyers are all aware of the nature of this report. And also the public advocate, the Office of the Public Advocate, or OPA, is made available, is made aware of that information as well. Step 4 is investigation. And this may or may not happen. If right off the top, it's clearly not credible, there's some, obvious flaw in the information, it's too general, it's just, obviously not worth exploring further. The commission doesn't have to explore it, but they, I think generally our commission staff and our commissioners right now in particular are quite good and quite interested in enforcing the law, enforcing commission rules, improving rates for ratepayers. And so I have full faith and confidence that they will investigate if there's a credible report. And we might clarify in the bill that they can't act on hearsay alone as the evidentiary basis for a penalty to utility. I think that's probably not necessary, but we're playing with that. The bill is still being finalized, by the way, the actual language. Step 5 is a covered sanction. So if the commission does impose a sanction of at least $250,000, and that may be a reduction in rates over the period of years, so that's over 5 years, that figure, then it's considered a covered sanction, meaning that it is possible for the whistleblower to apply for an award of between 10 and 30% of that sanction. There's an application process. They need to apply within 180 days of being notified. And then the commission decides whether, based on the quality of the whistleblower's report and its relationship to the ultimate sanction that was administered, whether the whistleblower will receive between 10 and 30% of the award. And this borrows from Dodd-Frank and the other programs that I mentioned. Then the award is made. And last but not least, there's public notice of the award. This goes back to awareness. We want to make sure everyone who could report bad utility behavior is able to report it, knows about it, knows this process exists. And so the general information about the award is posted to the commission's website. And last but not least, we need your help with getting this bill across the finish line. We do expect stiff resistance from Central Maine Power, from Versant, from other utilities. And so we need your help to testify at the public hearing, again, probably in the next 2 or 3 weeks, to write to your legislators, write to the governor, send an op-ed or letter to the editor, tell your friends, you can use social media, and to join and support our power. So we're happy to take Q&A on that subject as well. But I think we're going to be going to Q&A right now, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Great. Thanks so much, Seth, for that really helpful walkthrough. And thanks everyone so far for some really great questions right off the bat. Keep them coming in the Q&A function. But just to kick it off, a few questions about whether or the extent to which there's a risk of someone coming forward with false information. Can we trust that the whistleblowers that come forward are being honest? If there is a false accusation, what happens?
I'll take that one. Yeah, that's a great question. And it's one that obviously the SEC and DOJ and NHTSA, at the federal level have a lot of experience with. The investigation has to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that there is a violation of law or rule, or that there is significant imprudence by a utility. And that's a legal standard. Imprudence is a legal term. That means that utilities are overspending and should not be allowed to recoup that spending in our rates. So the utilities are very well equipped to defend themselves as part of the PUC process. It's like a court at the Public Utilities Commission. So the evidence needs to be clear and compelling in order for any action to be taken by the Public Utilities Commission. And if they go too far and take too much action by the utility's estimation, and the utility thinks they can appeal to the law court, then they will appeal to the law court. And that has happened before. So utilities can appeal in court the decisions of the PUC. And that's why we can all be very confident that simple hearsay as part of this whistleblower process will not amount to a hill of beans.
Great. And next, wondering about what sort of accountability, which we've been talking about a lot, but for a utilities company that engages in whistleblower retaliation. Of course, we have the great example from First Energy, which just, an awful situation, and wondering, are there consequences that the company is going to face for attacking the whistleblower in court, in the media? What do we envision for that kind of accountability?
Yeah. I mean, I'll take that. I'm interested in questions for Senator Tipping as well, and I think he's got a lot of great insight. Maybe he wants to add to any of these answers, but just generally speaking, the anonymity is a critical component. There are some protections against retaliation in current law. I mentioned they're not perfect. They are flawed, but there are some protections for whistleblowers in current law as enacted in 2022. But in addition, to the extent possible, there will be protection of the whistleblower's identity as they're initially making that report to the PUC. Frankly, and Alicia spoke about this to me. There's certain kinds of information that a corporation knows, like that could only have come from X employee, only this employee could have access to that information. So it's a good question. Corporations do eventually figure out who the whistleblower is most of the time, but as long as the legal standards are clear and they are protected, then generally, once you get far enough along in the process, there's really nothing that the corporation can do to retaliate.
And I'll just add that, yeah, the anonymity piece I think is important. And I think in general, when we're looking at these kinds of worker protection laws, the deck is always stacked against the employee. We do have, retaliation provisions in statute, but it doesn't always cover everything that can be done, and that requires obviously process in order to claim your rights. One other thing I'd just add is, at least in the drafting of this bill, we've looked at specifically not having penalties or findings just based on an anonymous report. These have to be investigated, and the report alone is not enough to create penalties or rate reductions or fees.
Great. And another question that came in. So how important is an inquisitive, honest, widely followed press in a successful whistleblower ecosystem?
Wow, Senator Tipping, do you have thoughts on the media?
Well, I'd say it's very important, and even outside of whistleblowers specifically, but holding power accountable, holding utilities accountable. And I think it's one of those pieces that can balance things. And I think it's important to note, one of the other questions I see gets to this a bit. Utilities, the state has a public interest, but utilities have a greater interest to their shareholders. And that's their main focus. And so I think an active press is one way of balancing that and making sure that things that are done wrong are brought to light. I think this is another tool that may be able to help with that as well.
Great. And so, of course, from the consumer perspective and from many of the people here, we want whistleblowers to come forward. But for the PUC, do they actually want anyone to come forward? Who kind of doesn't want people coming forward? And how do we balance that interest against what this bill is trying to do?
Yeah, I'll start, and Senator Tipping, you want to add? I mean, every regulator is only as good as they are, and I mean that's obvious, an obvious truism. But there is a democratic mechanism by which every regulator is chosen. In Maine, they are appointed by a governor and then confirmed by the legislature. In some places, they are democratically elected. I know that the current Public Utilities Commission, does not always agree with me or with our power. We've participated in PUC proceedings there and have disagreed with the PUC. But I will say that both the commissioners and their staff are good people who want to do the right thing. I think Maine generally has had a better PUC than quite a few other states. But is there room for improvement? Always. And I think it's really important that we, trust but verify, that we also try to hold our regulators accountable. Just yesterday, our power testified in support of a bill by Representative Sophie Warren that closes what's called the revolving door, which allows commissioners to go on to a job in the industry that they regulate. So measures like that are also important. But again, I think we have a very good PUC right now. This is not like a Ohio First Energy situation. By the way, the chair of the PUC there was one of the accused and was likely to go to jail for the rest of his life. Sadly, ended up committing suicide before the trial can be completed. But there's no question there are very egregious instances of PUC corruption at worst or laziness at best. But again, I think our PUC is very good and will take whistleblower reports very seriously. We've had conversations so far with the PUC about this bill, and they've been very constructive in their participation in that dialogue.
And maybe I'd just add to that. I think it's important to put in context that we're talking here about, especially when we're talking about electric utilities, it's just a huge amount of money.
Yep.
And it's monopoly control that the state is giving them over a vital resource for all Mainers. And so when you're talking about stakes that high, it's really a recipe for rent seeking, for regulatory capture, for them having a huge amount of political and economic power. And we've seen the extent of that. I mean, CMP for a decade was the ones that stopped meaningful climate legislation from going forward. We saw it in the Our Power referendum, in the corridor fight. That money and that political support is, they are one of the most powerful institutions in this state. And so I believe we need every tool we can have to hold them accountable and make sure that people can stand up for them when there is wrongdoing.
And just to jump on that a little bit, so seeing a few questions regarding these other areas that you're mentioning about where accountability is needed, the revolving door, regulatory capture. And so more of just a clarifying question. So this bill is just one piece of, to fix this really complicated and entangled problem of accountability. And do you think that, it sounds like there are other bills kind of being considered, but is it for both of you kind of your understanding this is one important piece in the larger way to fix some of these problems that are pretty structural?
Senator Tipping, you want to take that?
Yes, definitely.
Good. Thanks for
answer.
confirming. And so another question interesting that just came in, which is, can a consumer be a whistleblower? So one example might be a consumer that's being overcharged by an electric company for months and months and months, even when the power was shut off, or some other things that are happening. Maybe it would be a class action type of whistleblower scenario. Does the bill kind of contemplate that?
Yeah, maybe I can start. As written right now, it would be specifically an employee or a contractor. But I like that idea. So, Seth, I'd be interested if you have thoughts on that.
Yeah. I do actually. There is already a process at the PUC whereby any 10 customers of any utility can file a formal complaint. And in addition, there's also something called the intervener compensation process, which would allow those 10 or more people who wanted to file a complaint with the PUC to be represented by an attorney, which is important because you're talking about an adjudicatory process, and potentially also by an expert witness in the case. Our power recently used this new intervener compensation process. It's wonderful. Our PUC should be praised strongly for making it available. Other states do not have something that is as functional as this. In most states, they don't even have an intervener compensation process at all. And in our powers case, it was Central Maine Power's shareholders, the Spanish owners and investors, who had to pay for our attorney and our witness. So that was a proof positive in our view that the system is working and there is a way for everyday consumers to have a seat at the table at the Public Utilities Commission, at least this Public Utilities Commission that we have now. I think people should be very encouraged by that.
Great. And so another question that'd be great for either or both of you to speak on. So are there already identified particular Maine attorneys or law firms who are supporting this initiative or have experience or want to be representing whistleblowers to make sure that this is implemented and they're being protected?
None that I know of, but I'm very confident that this will happen. I think about in the 1980s, those of you who were around then, I'm talking my age, but Ralph Nader and Nader's Raiders were a bunch of law school students, right? I mean, what Ralph Nader did was he got a bunch of law school students to go after corporate misbehavior, and it worked. And this is a great opportunity for today's young, up-and-coming law students and people who've already passed the bar, like Sophie here, to get an additional line of work and represent whistleblowers. Also to use that intervener compensation process for consumers that I spoke about. So absolutely, I think it's a great question. I can think of some lawyers who will likely want to help, but it will be a new process. So, the proof will be in the pudding.
Yeah. Seth, you talked a little bit about CMP and Versant probably wanting to oppose this, of course. And so I was wondering if you could speak a little to what we're expecting the opposition is going to be, what it's going to look like, and kind of your thoughts and predictions on that.
Well, I'll start, and then I want to see what Senator Tipping thinks about this. But there are two ways that I think that CMP and Versant and other utilities could oppose this. One would be like just a full frontal attack on it, and the other would be a more crafty workaround approach. The full frontal attack would be, to try to pick it apart, say that it's not going to work, make arguments against it on the merits, and say things that are probably going to be misleading and mischaracterize it. That's one way that it could happen, and they could do that very, very, in a very declaratory way, very upfront way at the hearing, testifying against the bill. The other way that they could do it is to come forward in testifying neither for nor against the bill, behave as if they're fine with this. They have internal whistleblower programs already. They're doing everything right. They have nothing to hide. And then quietly lobby against it in the hallways of the State House. And if I had to bet, and I'm, those of you who know me know I've been around the legislature for a while, and I'm interested in what Senator Tipping has to say. But if I had to bet, I think they would probably choose the latter. They would probably testify neither for nor against. Oh, no problem, nothing to see here. We're fine with it. Maybe some technical observations, and then quietly work the heck out of this thing on the side, in the hallways, private conversations with certain lawmakers, and potentially with the governor and her staff. I'm hopeful that the majority of the legislature and the governor will ultimately see fit to support this. But that's why we need you. That's why we need everyone on this call today and people who are watching this recording afterwards on YouTube and on our website to jump in, testify in support, contact your legislators and the governor.
Yeah, and I'll just add that as we get toward the end of session here, so committees are supposed to be 100% done with voting their bills by the 9th. we'll see if that actually happens. But it becomes easier in some ways to mount that kind of opposition. You just have to say, oh yeah, we would support this in the idea of this, but oh, there's just all these little problems that, oh, just technical issues, and this isn't ready for prime time. And if they can just delay even a little bit at this point, they can kill a bill. So it's important to keep our eye on the prize here and on the main thrust of this. And we've worked very hard to make sure there's as little surface area to attack as possible. Have this be a straightforward piece of legislation that really makes a difference. But we will definitely, see those kind of attacks one way or another.
Thanks. And so for Senator Tipping, now I imagine some folks here are thinking, I want to be part of this and push this bill forward, and are thinking, okay, it seems like a way to do that is to testify. But could you kind of walk through, for people who have never testified to the legislature but really are motivated to do so, to again push this forward, how hard is it? Is it worth it? What's the process to kind of demystify that a little bit?
Yeah, it has become increasingly easy to testify on legislation in Maine. So there will be a date scheduled for a public hearing. We probably won't get a ton of notice at this point once the bill goes in and once it gets scheduled. But that'll be provided publicly, and I'm sure our power will put that information out. And then when the day comes, there'll be a bunch of bills that are in a certain time block, and it may be 1 or 2 or 5 or more. But sometime during that block, the bill that you're interested in will come up, and you can either attend in person. This will be a hearing before the Energy and Utilities Committee in their committee room, or you can submit written testimony. And there's a helpful link. I think it's mainelegislature.org/testimony. You may have that handy there, Seth, or I can grab it. But you can submit written testimony through that link or sign up to be there on Zoom. And I think that is a great option for folks that maybe can't come to Augusta and spend all afternoon in a committee room waiting for a bill to come up. Just sign up, be there. It's easier than joining as a panelist on this conversation. Be able to just present your testimony to the committee there. And in terms of specific logistics, you in most committees get 3 minutes to have your say, and then members of the committee who have heard your testimony will have a chance to ask any questions about what you've said. But it's pretty straightforward. You just want to be there, show your support for legislation, and it really does matter. We have a lot of lobbyists in Augusta that kind of testify on every bill. I call them the frequent flyers. And the committee gets very used to those people. But when members of the public actually show up on a piece of legislation and say that this matters to them, that really breaks through, and that makes a difference. So whether you can be there in person or in writing, and what you write will be printed out and put right in front of the committee members, they'll get it on their desk, or if you can testify by Zoom, it really will make a difference.
That's great to hear. I think we have time for just one more question, and we'll try to keep it brief, but and it's more of a broader question, but we've talked a little bit about the whistleblower protections that sort of do exist, like protections against retaliation. But I'm wondering if both of you can just really quickly, we know we've talked about the benefits of a bill like this, but do we really need a state law like this? In just a few words, if you could kind of summarize.
That's such a great question to end on. Senator Tipping is actually the Senate chair of the Labor Committee, so he might have a bigger picture, idea about protecting employees and protecting whistleblowers more generally with respect to other, labor laws as well and that sort of thing. But what's really unique about this bill, this proposal that we are working on, and that we hope that everyone who was here today will help us to pass, is that it will be first in the nation. And it's been said that the states are the crucible of democracy, right? That every individual state can actually try something, see if it works. And then if it does work, that might be adopted by other states. And who knows, it might be adopted by the federal government. So the FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, also very important, could someday have a program like this as well. Maine's a small state, right? With 1.4 million people last I checked. But we can try something, see if it works. And if it does, by golly, it could spread. And so that's one of the things that's really exciting about taking this moment of decreasing corporate accountability in Washington, because we all know what's happening down there. Many of these proven whistleblower programs being gutted, one way or another at the federal level. And we can actually do something positive here in Maine. We can actually see forward movement within the utility context that we know is so critically important to Maine's economy and future. And hopefully, through Maine's positive experience with this program, allow that to spread naturally to other states and ultimately to the federal government. So we are very excited at Our Power about this bill, about its potential to improve utility behavior, to make our utilities more conscious of their sacred duty to the customers that they serve and over whom we give them the privilege of a monopoly. And I think everyone here knows that our utilities have room for improvement. So this seems like a wonderful opportunity for Maine, very appropriate to the moment that we find ourselves in, a very positive opportunity that you can help with. Senator Tipping, any final thoughts from you?
Yeah, I would just say that we do have some whistleblower protection laws in Maine and some anti-retaliation laws. They specifically apply if you're reporting that a company is breaking the law when you're an employee. And they don't have what is contained in this bill, which is a process of rewarding or remunerating folks who step forward. And enforcement of those laws is not, let's say, the most robust. We have 8 people in the Bureau of Labor Standards that enforce our labor protections, and they each are overseeing 7,000 some corporations in this state, and they don't always have the teeth to be able to act on even pretty bad examples of retaliation. But also, we have stronger laws when it comes to areas where there's a public trust or where there's significant harm to the public. So we have some stronger ones around healthcare. If you see bad things being done to a patient, we have greater protections. And I think this is an area where we should have both that reward and those greater protections as well, because bad faith things done in this industry, they harm consumers across the state. They cost us all. And we want to promote the good actions of good people standing up to that kind of thing, because it is a public trust and a public good.
Great. Thank you both so much. And thank you to everyone here for attending this May Power Lunch. Stay tuned for the June Power Lunch. All of the Power Lunches are first Fridays, 12 to 1 p.m. Make sure you're on our email list, follow us on Facebook, all of the above. But please do plan to testify, contact legislatures, the governor, and just be part of this project to hold our utilities to the highest possible standards. So again, on behalf of the entire Our Power team and all of our panelists, thank you so much for being a part of this in our Maine energy democracy movement. We'll see you soon, hopefully next month or sooner, and enjoy your weekend. Thanks, everyone.